Hi, this is Dr. Christine Harrington, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about how we can use the science of motivation to engage all of our students as learners. So we're going to actually use a model by Latkowski and Ginsberg that is a culturally based model that talks about 4 conditions that are needed in order for students to feel motivated. And basically what Latkowski and Ginsberg talks about is that you really need to get to know your students and their individual backgrounds and really respect kind of the individuals within your class and what they bring to the learning community of your course. So there are 4 kind of pillars that we will discuss: establishing inclusion, developing attitude, enhancing meaning, and engendering confidence. And according to Latkowski and Ginsberg, these are the 4 primary conditions that will lead to high levels of motivation among your students. So we'll begin by looking at establishing inclusion. So this really kind of centers around 2 key concepts. One is a concept of respect. Again, validating kind of the students who they are when they come to you from varying backgrounds, whether it's ethnic diversity, whether it's socioeconomic diversity, cognitive diversity, personality diversity, etc., and making sure that we have clear expectations set forth for our students. And then the other key ingredient here really is that we are establishing good, strong connections and a sense of belonging in our classroom so that people attending your class are really feeling like they're a part of a learning community. So one way we can start to build that connection is actually before the semester even begins by sending out an email. Let's take a look at this study by Legg and Wilson. Legg and Wilson has randomly assigned students to one of 2 conditions. One group of students received an email 1 week prior to class, and the other group did not receive any email. And the professor actually did not know who received the email because the email was sent out by the teaching assistant. So everything else was held constant and was the same. Now, at the beginning of the semester, during the first week, you can see that the students who received the email actually had a higher perception of the course. And this isn't really that shocking because, the professor did reach out to them. But the very cool part of this finding is that these findings held true right through the very last week of the semester. So even though everything else was the same, this one small act of reaching out by an email really did seem to increase attitudes, perception, and motivation. So don't underestimate the power of some small actions you can take as a faculty member. Same thing is true on the first day of class. In this particular study by Wilson and Wilson, the students were broken up into 2 different groups. And the professor actually didn't show on the first day, which is not something we recommend at our college for sure, but it was part of an experiment. And instead of showing, the TA came and showed a videotape of the professor. And in one condition, it was a positive, friendly one. And in another one, it says negative, but it really wasn't negative. It was just more flat and non-emotional. So it just wasn't as engaging. And the results were that the group who had that positive first day experience had higher motivation across the entire semester, and this also translated into higher grades as well. So some of the early actions we take really do make a very big difference in terms of student motivation. Here's one more study about the beginning of class and how that really makes a big difference. In this particular study, sections were assigned to either have an activity or not on the first day. It wasn't random assignment of students, but instead it was random assignment of sections. And here what the activity really was a reciprocal interview where 5 or 6 students would spend some time talking about the course expectations, and then the instructor would interview one of the representatives from that group. And then that group also created questions where they would then interview the professor. So that's the reciprocal part of it. And what you can see here from this chart is that the classes that had the activity viewed the entire class as a more positive learning experience. Again, we're talking about 20 to 30 minutes or so on the first day of class, making a pretty significant change here across the entire semester. So very powerful stuff. The next pillar, after establishing inclusion and making sure your students feel a part of class, is developing attitude. And having students really have a positive mindset can go a really long way. In fact, positive mindset is one of the key resilient factors to really help students persevere, even if they end up hitting some bumps along the road. In addition to positive mindset, they also need to attribute their successes and failures to internal variables. And this refers to the sense of locus of control. Do you or don't you think you have the power to change the outcomes or consequences? So let's take a minute and look at some of these cognitive variables. So Rosenthal and Jacobson did a very classic study. If you're not familiar with it, I'm just going to review it quickly so you can see the key power of it. It is an unethical study that would not be allowed to probably happen today, but we did learn quite a bit from doing this study. And the question on the table was, do teacher expectations impact student performance? And what they did was they took elementary school students, they were upper elementary level, and they were all given a IQ test. And what happened is that the teachers were given rosters, but the IQ tests given to the teachers were actually fake. So they were randomly assigned to either have smart or not smart IQ scores. So these students did not know their IQ or their label, and no one else did. The only ones who knew whether or not the child was smart or not smart was the teacher. And it really wasn't a true indicator, as I said before, because they were randomly given smart and not smart IQ scores. And what they discovered at the end is the group of students who were labeled smart actually performed much better than the students who were in the not smart group. So this is quite powerful, because what this shows us is that our expectations as professors can significantly impact the performance of our students. Now, there's more to this, because they actually tried this also with grad assistants working with rats in a laboratory. Psychologists like to do these experiments with rats running through mazes, and it looks at learning, etc. And what grad assistants were told was that the rats that they were working with were either from a fast learning litter or a slow learning litter. Again, I'm sure you're onto this already, but these were arbitrary, not accurate descriptions. They were just randomly assigned with a label. And here we go, folks. Fast learning rats not only mastered the mazes more quickly, but also were viewed as smarter, more attractive, and more likable. I don't know about you, but I have not yet met a rat that I found attractive or likable. That's called the halo effect, when you think one good thing about a person and then you all of a sudden think more positive good things. But again, the point here is that our expectations impact the performance of others or of rats. Now let's take a look at attribution theory, because this has to do with that concept of locus of control and what actually is responsible for our actions. So with attribution theory, basically you are trying to decide what is the reason for your success or your failure. And Mueller and Dweck did this really fascinating study on this subject. And what they did was they had students, and again, these were upper elementary school students, do a puzzle that was of moderate difficulty level. So it was a puzzle that was doable, kind of something that they could do, and everyone pretty much met with success. Then they were given feedback on their performance, and this is where the experiment part came in. The feedback was based on what group they were randomly assigned to. So one group was told, wow, you did really well, you must be really smart. The second group was told, wow, you did really well, you must have worked really hard. And the third group was the control group, and they were just told, wow, you did really well, period. So after getting this feedback, students then had to do another puzzle, but this time it was a very difficult puzzle, and it was designed to create a failure experience. After failing at this puzzle, which everyone pretty much did not meet with success, they were then asked to do a moderate difficulty puzzle again. Very similar to this one over here, but not exactly identical. And what the researchers wanted to do is they wanted to compare the puzzle performance here to the puzzle performance here to see if there were any changes. So moderate to moderate at the beginning and end of the study. Those are the description of the three groups again, but let's just go ahead and take a peek at the results now. So here what you can see is this line that goes up is the red line, and this is the effort group. So the group that performed the best was the group that was told they worked really hard. So after they had that failure experience, they probably said, I guess I didn't work hard enough. Now the ability group, this is really the most shocking part of the study, actually performed worse. So not only did they not perform as well as the other group, but their scores actually went down. Now this was the group that was told, wow, you did really well. You must be really smart. Now, the reason behind this is after they had that failure experience, they must have said to themselves, I guess I'm really not that smart. And most people think that smartness is not something that you can change. So if you don't think you can do anything about it, you're more likely to give up. And that's exactly what happened here. So students in this smart or ability group solved less puzzles correctly. They didn't want to continue. They didn't enjoy the task. And the folks in the effort group certainly did solve more, did want to persist more, and did enjoy the task more. So again, this really speaks to the power of mindset. So the application really for you as a faculty member is by helping students attribute their mistakes to something that's internal and changeable, like effort, is going to lead to the best academic outcomes. So your job is to try to help students interpret their successes and failures based on these internal changeable variables like effort. All right, now we're on to enhancing meaning, the third pillar in Molodkowsky and Ginsberg model. And what we're talking about here is that, we're really kind of speaking to the issue of value. Are we making connections to the real world? Are we really challenging our students to engage with content in a deep and meaningful way? And that's what we want to do here. So you want to make sure that you're creating learning activities that are going to promote this motivational condition. So by making real-world connections, you first need to know your students. So we're back to that individual focus again. The more you connect and individually get to know your students, the easier it's going to be for you to make connections that are meaningful to them versus meaningful to just you. Obviously, examples are a very powerful way to do that, but you can also do that through a variety of assignments that are connected to real-world issues, such as in my educational psychology class, I'll have them work on lesson plans, which is something they'll need to do as a teacher when they get that job in the future. So making connections, between what's happening today and tomorrow and the next day are really important. And sometimes you can do that through a simple rationale. Other times it may be a more in-depth learning activity. Either way, you want to emphasize that. Another really powerful way to emphasize critical thinking and higher level thought processes is through skillful questioning. Many of us ask our students questions throughout class, but I challenge you to think about the kinds of questions that you ask. If there's a right or wrong answer, then it's going to be a lower level question. It's probably factual in nature. And although that's important and a good first step towards critical thinking, we don't want to stop there. We want to continue to push our students, challenging them to really deeply explore the content. So we want to, instead of relying solely on the factual questions, to add another layer of critical questions. So asking questions such as why, what evidence do you have to support that idea? How might this connect to other concepts we've previously talked about in this class? So this is really the idea here, is really to kind of push and challenge students. Remember, you are the one that gets to set the stage for how learning is going to take place. And by increasing the challenging opportunities for students, you're going to engage them. Students are not motivated when it's considered busy work or boring, or they don't see the meaning or value behind the activity. The last motivational condition is called engendering confidence. And here, what we need to do is we really need to help build self-efficacy. In fact, the research on retention is so amazing because one of the best predictors of what leads to successful outcomes is self-efficacy. Clearly, having academic ability and other things like grades and other academic experiences make a big difference in terms of your success, but it really is very much focused on whether or not you believe you will be successful in college. So in order to do that, we want to teach them some basic goal setting and study strategy type techniques. We also want to make sure we're using a lot of feedback to help them learn, because that's really how self-efficacy is developed. It has to come from successful experiences. So feedback is a powerful way to build that, and then using that feedback to create a stronger academic product is going to really enhance your self-efficacy. And then once there is success, we certainly want students to celebrate that and build in ways for students to do that in our courses. So let's first talk about goal setting, because this is an important element in our classes, is to make sure our students are setting effective goals. In fact, this research study by Marisano and colleagues in 2010 looks at comparing students who received a goal-setting intervention to those who did not. Now, it's important to note that this goal-setting intervention was only 2.5 hours in length. So we're talking about 2.5 hours, and that's the only difference between the two groups. And what we find in the results is that the goal group had a very much higher GPA, 2.9 compared to 2.2. And this is really powerful. It's a significant difference, and obviously you can see from a clinical standpoint, it also is very significant. So again, a very brief intervention on how to set effective goals can be quite powerful. It also led to less dropouts. So now that you know the importance of helping students set goals, it's very important for you to then also know how to teach them to set goals. So this ABCs model is based on research-based strategies that will help students effectively set and implement goals. The A stands for aim high, and aim high is probably the most important characteristic of goals because the research has been very, very clear that challenging goals lead to the best outcome. So if you want to achieve at a higher level, you need to set the bar higher. Aiming high is really critical. The second one has to do with the self-efficacy. We have to believe in ourselves. If you don't believe in yourself, then you're not going to persist when you hit a bump in the road. And you probably are not also going to set the goal quite as high. So this is a very important element as well. This care and commit is really what we're talking about today. It has to do with the motivational factors. You know, do you care? Is there meaning or value in this goal? And how committed are you to successfully achieving it? Finally, we need to make sure that goals are specific in nature, and that makes it easier for us to monitor our progress and engage in self-reflection. And we want to encourage our students to do this by maybe even incorporating some self-reflective activities into our class, asking them to monitor their progress towards their academic goals in your class. So the idea of the challenge, I just wanted to share with you a little bit of the research behind that because I think many of us think that goals, challenging goals might lead to failure experiences, and we worry about the well-being of our students. But as I said before, the results are completely consistent across multiple studies. These are some giant meta-analysis, literature review type studies where they're just looking at endless numbers of research studies on goal setting, and the key finding is that challenging specific goals are going to lead to the best results. Now, the downside of goals is the concern I just mentioned. Do we have to worry about a student not achieving it and what might happen to them? So let me just share with you this very interesting study by Reynolds and Baird. You can see it was a large-scale study with almost 13,000 students in the beginning and almost 5,000 at the end. It was a longitudinal study. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to see whether or not there was an emotional cost to goal setting. And what they discovered was there was not. So even students who did not achieve their goal still did not have higher levels of depression than those that did. In fact, they found that higher expectations were actually associated with lower levels of depression. So this really provides us with some evidence that it's fine to challenge ourselves. We don't need to be overly worried. Students tend to be pretty resilient, even if they don't accomplish their goals, even if they don't accomplish the goals they set out to accomplish. They will achieve higher than if they don't set the bar high. Now, in addition to helping students set their goals high, we also need to make sure we're teaching them study strategies. We can't make the assumption that our students just know how to study and how to study well. So we want to provide and infuse some study tips and strategies. It might be note-taking. It might be how to engage in studying behaviors, engaging in study groups, engaging with flashcards and quizzes. Maybe it's even requiring some of the online supports that publisher materials provide or that you create yourself to really make sure that students are engaged in these practices. Not just giving a midterm and a final where they don't get an opportunity to practice these and they almost really encourage that cramming and procrastination at the end. Instead, if you have quizzes and activities every week, then the students are going to have to stay on top of their tasks and make sure they're engaging with your content on a regular basis, which obviously is going to lead to a better outcome at the end of the semester. If you need some more guidance on that, you certainly can reach out to CELT, and we'd be happy to talk to you about different strategies for that. The self-efficacy is also really, fostered when you provide them with academically rigorous curriculum. So in order to do that, we need to also provide them with high level of support. So we have to communicate high expectations through challenging assignments, but at the same time, we also have to have support built in. So in the beginning, you see down here, I wrote no stakes, because in the beginning, you may actually have a non-graded assignment that's challenging in nature, and you're supporting them with it. And then as the semester progresses, the stakes might get higher and the percentage of the grade might increase based on the product that you're asking for. But along that way, now they've gotten feedback, at every step of the way, which makes them much better prepared to perform well on the assignments that are really going to significantly impact their grade. So that's another strategy. Now, when you're giving feedback to students, which again, as I mentioned before, is one of the best ways to help them learn, you want to make sure that that feedback is based on some standard. So rubrics are a fabulous way to do that. By using rubrics, it's giving students very specific information about what you're hoping to have them accomplish via that assignment. And it can be very informative to the students. So you want to make sure the nature of your feedback is global enough so that they're not overwhelmed by the nuances, and it's clear what the big issues are. And all of the feedback needs to be very specific and constructive. So instead of saying this is not well organized, provide them with some ideas about how they could better organize. Using headings here would help the reader better understand the key concepts you're trying to communicate. What about using a heading such as? That's really effective. The other key is to make sure that the feedback is very much timely. So you want to make sure you're providing it as sooner versus later, and that's where some of the Campus Cruiser tools online can be quite helpful, because they don't have to wait till the next class. You can actually provide feedback via the online course management system. So providing your students with many, many opportunities for feedback is going to be one of the best ways that you can keep them motivated. If you think about one of the areas where a lot of people are quite motivated is the area of video games. When you play a video game, think about how much feedback you're getting. You're constantly getting positive and negative feedback throughout the entire process, and that feedback is quite motivational. So what we want to do is build that into our courses as best we can. And finally, we want to talk about celebrating different types of success. We know that some students are going to excel at giving presentations, and others are going to do much better at a paper or a project. So we want to make sure that our course design, really does allow for a variety of different success stories, and that we wanted to provide students with a lot of positive feedback once they are successful at the task that we have asked them to achieve for our course. Providing them with opportunities to self-reflect both before and after they hand in an assignment is another great way to build that confidence and self-efficacy, and will lead to higher levels of motivation. So I challenge you to think about how you could build in some self-reflection papers or journals or little addendums to assignments that they're handing in to really engage them. It could even be class discussions or online discussions about it. Lots of different variety of options out there in terms of how you can encourage your students to engage in self-reflection. So I thank you for participating in this motivation workshop, and I wish you all the best. You worked hard today, and I hope that you continue to work hard to motivate your students.